Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a marble hallway where torches flicker and echoing footsteps vanish behind velvet drapes. You're not in your bed anymore. You're in ancient Macedonia, and you're about to be born into a world of gold, blood, and destiny. The air smells like smoke and crushed herbs. Outside, a storm rumbles. Inside, a queen is giving birth to a boy who will someday change the course of history. Spoiler alert, it's you. But here's your first reality check. You probably won't survive this. Infant mortality is brutal in 356 BCE. You might not even make it to your own first birthday. Sorry. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing who's out there, curling up for a little history. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive with a cry that startles the midwives. Outside, lightning splits the sky over Pella, the Macedonian capital. According to your mom, Olympias, it's a sign. She's convinced you're not just the son of Philip the Sec, her often drunk, frequently stabbing husband, but the literal child of Zeus. Yep, king of the gods. The story goes that a snake slithered into her bed the night you were conceived. Do with that what you will. Philip, meanwhile, is off conquering cities and making more enemies than a drunken wasp at a summer picnic. But when he hears of your birth, he's thrilled. In fact, on the very day you're born, he reportedly gets 3 pieces of good news: your birth, his army's victory in a major battle, and his horses winning at the Olympics. Coincidence? Or is the universe setting you up for something epic? You grow up in a palace filled with statues, shouting men, and the kind of luxury that comes with being next in line to rule a kingdom of rowdy warriors. Your cradle is carved from ivory. Your nurse, Laniki, sings lullabies that might include the occasional battlefield metaphor. And your mom? She burns incense and tells you stories of Achilles, Heracles, and other tragic, overachieving heroes. Subtle foreshadowing, don't you think? From a young age, you're intense. You ask big questions like, where does the sun sleep? And why can't I have a real sword yet? You don't play with other kids as much as challenge them to races, fights, or philosophical debates about whether centaurs are real. Fringe fact, some Macedonians did believe horsemen existed somewhere far off in India. So don't worry, you're not the only one. By the time you're 5, your world is already bursting with symbolism. There's a story, maybe true, maybe not, about you reciting entire passages of Homer by heart before you lose your baby teeth. Your favorite bedtime reading? The Iliad, obviously. Historians still argue whether you actually slept with a copy of it under your pillow later in life. But let's be honest, it sounds exactly like you. At 7, you start physical training. No more royal pampering. Your tutors throw you into the mud, teach you how to wrestle, and yell about honor like they're prepping you for a future career as either a king or a professional motivational speaker. You learn to ride horses, hurl javelins, and climb rocky hills until your feet bleed. Because apparently, ruling the world takes calluses. Philip, despite his many flaws, and wow, there are many, is actually a brilliant military strategist. He reforms the Macedonian army, builds a network of alliances, and treats diplomacy like a game of high-stakes poker with spears. But as a dad, let's just say he's complicated. One day, he praises you for your courage. The next, he's off getting married to yet another woman half his age. And you're like, cool, I guess I needed another half-brother. Olympias doesn't take these new wives well. She raises you to believe you're special, destined for more than just ruling a kingdom. The gods whisper to you, she says. You are not like the others, which is a comforting thought, unless you're trying to fall asleep and now you think Zeus is eavesdropping on your dreams. One strange detail that sticks with people: you never enjoy being idle. Even as a child, you reportedly refuse luxurious banquets unless there's serious conversation. You once complain, "My father will leave me no great conquests to achieve." Imagine being 10 and already stressed about your legacy. Your hair is long, your eyes mismatched. One blue, one brown, if you believe the legends. And you've got this restlessness that makes tutors nervous and generals take notice. Some claim you speak with a kind of golden glow in your voice, like you were born to command. Others think you're just very good at faking confidence. Either way, you're magnetic. People follow you even when you're still in short tunics and asking if birds can be trained as spies. By your early teens, it's obvious. You're not normal. And everyone, from servants to soldiers, starts treating you with that dangerous mix of awe and fear. You like it. But you're also weirdly self-aware for a kid with a silver dagger and a snake-worshipping mother. You know expectations are heavy. You can feel history pressing down on your shoulders, even when you're just sneaking olives from the royal kitchen. And one night, when the moon is bright over Pella, you lie in bed thinking of Achilles again. Not his strength, not his battles, but how he died young, forever famous. A part of you, small but growing, thinks that might be worth it. Even now, the world waits. Somewhere out there, a horse refuses to be tamed. A teacher sharpens his mind for you. And Persia? Persia still sleeps soundly, unaware that a boy has been born who will soon march straight into its dreams. You're maybe 12 when you first meet the beast that will become your best friend, and possibly the only creature you'll ever truly trust. His name is Bucephalus. He's massive, wild-eyed, and very nearly a murder machine with hooves. When the horse dealer drags him into the palace courtyard, even the stable boys step back. The animal's already flung 3 riders into the fountain and kicked one unfortunate tree so hard it now leans left forever. Your father, King Philip, watches with a wine cup in one hand and growing irritation on his face. He loves horses, just not ones that cost a small fortune and behave like they escaped from Hades' petting zoo. But you're enchanted. While the grown men shout about wasting money and how no one could ride that beast, you quietly observe. You notice something odd. Bucephalus keeps spooking at his own shadow. Not the noise, not the crowd, not even the fact that someone threw a fig at him earlier. Rude. Just his shadow. Every time it slides into his vision, he jerks and bolts. You walk toward him. Philip's about to bark for someone to drag you back, but he stops. Everyone does. The air goes still, like the entire courtyard is holding its breath. You speak gently. No big commands, no ropes or whips. You take the reins and slowly turn Bucephalus toward the sun so his shadow falls behind him. And then you mount. The courtyard gasps as the monster becomes a partner. You ride him in a wide, calm circle. No one dares move. Even Philip has forgotten his wine. When you finally slide off and give the horse a soft pat on the neck, your father laughs. Not just a chuckle, full-on belly laughter. "My boy," he says, loud enough for the whole city to hear, "you must find a kingdom large enough for your ambition. Macedonia is too small for you." No pressure or anything. That's how Bucephalus becomes yours. And not just yours. He becomes a legend. His name means ox head, probably because of his broad forehead, or maybe the weird star-shaped brand burned into it. You two become inseparable. He follows you like a dog, nips at people who annoy you, and, according to at least one extremely biased poem, once saved you from a river full of crocodiles. Historians still argue whether that actually happened, or whether someone just got really carried away with the metaphors. You trained together for years. He's fast, fearless, and allergic to anyone else trying to ride him. When you start dreaming about future battles, you picture him charging beside you. Your tutors roll their eyes, but they also stop criticizing you during lessons. You're becoming the kind of person people don't interrupt. Speaking of tutors, your education shifts gears right around this time. You've outgrown the usual palace instructors. You need someone who won't be intimidated by a teenager who tames killer horses for fun. Enter Aristotle. Yes, that Aristotle. He's not exactly thrilled at first. He's a philosopher, not a babysitter. But your father offers him a cushy deal. Build a private school, teach the prince, and get paid in money and prestige. Aristotle agrees, mostly because he's secretly fascinated by the idea of molding a future king. The lessons don't happen in a classroom, by the way. They take place outdoors, under trees, in gardens, on walks. You learn about logic, ethics, astronomy, politics, and biology. You ask annoying, brilliant questions that make even Aristotle stop and blink. He introduces you to plants that cure fevers, the concept of golden mean balance, and why democracy is both genius and a headache. But you don't just memorize facts. You absorb ideas, theories that shape how you'll rule one day. Aristotle insists that a leader should strive for virtue, not just power. You nod thoughtfully, even while imagining how fast Bucephalus could trample a corrupt tax collector. Quirky aside, Legend says Aristotle once gave you a secret version of the Iliad, annotated just for you, and that you carried it into every battle, tucked inside your armor. Maybe true, maybe not, but you definitely memorized huge chunks of it. Achilles is your personal hero, and you study his life like it's a roadmap, even though, spoiler alert, his story ends in a nasty heel injury and early death. Outside of school, you're already acting like a general in training. Philip lets you sit in on military planning meetings. You ask sharp questions. You sketch maps. You correct grown men on supply chain logistics. It's infuriating, but also impressive. One veteran tells a friend, if he doesn't get us all killed, he'll make history. At 14, while your father's off subduing a rebel city, you get your first taste of command. A local tribe starts stirring up trouble near the border. Rather than wait for backup, you lead a force to crush them. It's not a huge campaign, just a show of strength, but you handle it flawlessly. When Philip returns, he finds his son already basking in applause. The general he left behind to babysit you shrugs and says he didn't ask for permission, he just won. Still, life isn't all riding in glory. You're growing up in a palace dripping with political tension. Your father's enemies keep multiplying. Assassination rumors buzz like flies. And your mother? She's getting stranger. Her rituals grow darker. She talks to snakes. Some nights you catch her whispering to the gods in languages even the priests don't understand. You love her fiercely, but there's fear there too. She believes you're destined for greatness. But destiny is heavy and lonely. One night, you lie in your room, arms crossed behind your head, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Bucephalus snorts softly in the stable outside. And you wonder, will the world ever be big enough to hold everything you want? Tomorrow, you ride again. Your boots crunch softly on the gravel path as you walk toward the garden. Fig trees on both sides, sunlight filtering through lazy branches. There's a smell of thyme in the air, warm and earthy, and somewhere behind you, Bucephalus is chewing grass way too loudly. You're 15 now, and even though you can throw a javelin farther than some grown men, you still start your day like this. Sitting cross-legged on a mat, waiting for Aristotle to arrive with his scrolls and dry wit. Your classroom is not made of stone or wood. It's made of questions. Aristotle strolls in, robes fluttering just slightly, and asks you the kind of thing that doesn't come with an easy answer. Would you rather be feared or loved? Or, if a lion could speak, would you understand it? You reply without missing a beat. If it speaks my language, it's breakfast. He rolls his eyes. You grin. It's a whole thing. He's teaching you more than facts. He's shaping how you think. You study metaphysics. What is reality, really? And learn that everything's made of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. You debate politics, ethics, how to run a state, and why democracy sometimes ends with people voting for complete chaos. Still feels relevant, doesn't it? He teaches you that moderation is key, but you, being you, quietly file that under probably not for me. You also dive into biology. You dissect animals, sketch muscles and bones, classify birds by beak shape. Aristotle believes in observing nature to understand it, and you start noticing the tiniest details. The way ants organize themselves, how fish swim upstream, why cats always look like they're plotting. Aristotle doesn't just feed you knowledge, he respects your curiosity. You don't just ask, what is justice? You ask, how do I make people believe I'm just? And your teacher gives you a careful look, the kind he saves for moments when he sees the emperor in the boy. Meanwhile, Macedonia is still a mess of court drama. You take breaks from philosophy to dodge palace feuds. Olympias and Philip barely speak. She blames him for not treating you like a god's son. He blames her for everything. At dinner, the tension is so thick you could stab it with a fork. But let's get back to the garden. One morning, you ask Aristotle if anyone's ever ruled the entire world. He laughs. The world is too big, he says. Too many languages, too many rivalries. You nod politely, but inside, a little voice whispers. Maybe for them, not for me. One odd story from this time. You apparently tried to invent your own language, like just for fun. You started tweaking words and grammar, annoying your tutors to no end. Historians still argue whether this was a legit attempt at a private code or just teen boredom taken to scholarly extremes. You also start reading Eastern philosophy, bits of Zoroastrianism, ideas from India. Aristotle doesn't love that, but you're already poking at the edges of his worldview. You want to know what other cultures believe, what gods they worship, what makes them tick. This curiosity will be your secret weapon. Now, let's talk drama. When you're 16, things escalate. Philip marries a new wife, Cleopatra, not the Egyptian one. Don't get excited. She's Macedonian, young, and her uncle Attalus is not subtle. At the wedding feast, he raises a cup and toasts the idea that she'll finally give Philip a legitimate heir. Translation: not like Alexander, who has a foreign mother. Cue the record scratch. You leap up, furious, and hurl your drink in his face. There's shouting. Philip tries to calm things down, but, possibly drunk, slips and falls flat on his face. You mutter something like, "Look, the man who wants to cross into Asia can't even cross a floor." Ouch. Royal burn. The next morning, you and Olympias pack up and leave. She heads back to Epirus, her homeland. You go north to Illyria. For a while, it seems like the great future king might just fade into exile. Another almost was, sidelined by family feuds and court politics. But Philip's no fool. He can't afford to alienate the one heir with actual military chops. Within a few months, you're summoned back. The silence between you stretches like a taut bowstring, but neither of you says sorry. Instead, he gives you your first real command. It's almost as if he's testing you. There's a tribal rebellion near the northern border. You ride out, barely 17, leading a Macedonian force into rugged terrain. And guess what? You crush them, quickly, cleanly, with minimal losses. Then, because you're extra, you name a new city after yourself, Alexandropolis. It's your first. Won't be your last. Back home, your stock skyrockets. Even your critics admit, the boy's got something. Philip beams like he trained you himself. He didn't. Olympia sends you incense and cryptic compliments. Aristotle warns you gently not to let glory cloud judgment. You nod. You hear him. You ignore him. At 18, you help Philip plan the biggest move yet, a war against Persia. It's been brewing for years. The old enemy across the Aegean. Rich, vast, and, according to Macedonian propaganda, soft. Persia is the dragon your father wants to slay before he dies. You're supposed to help him, maybe even stand beside him when he crosses the Hellespont. But that moment never comes, because at a royal wedding, yet another one, honestly, who can keep track, Philip is assassinated, stabbed by a bodyguard right before he walks into the theater. Chaos explodes. Nobles scatter. Olympia steps in like a storm in sandals and seizes the palace. You're 19. And suddenly, you're king. But we'll get to that. Tonight, you fall asleep under fig leaves, a scroll open on your chest, Bucephalus snoring nearby. The stars flicker above you, distant and cold. You whisper Achilles' name once before closing your eyes, not because you worship him, but because you intend to do better. You wake up a king, but not the kind with time for ceremony and cake. You're 19, the crown still metaphorical, your sandals dusty, and your enemies are already sharpening their knives. The second Philip hits the ground, it's like someone yanks the lid off a pressure cooker. Boom. Chaos. Macedonian nobles start picking sides, foreign powers see an opening, and a few loyal allies suddenly forget your name. It's crisis mode from minute one. The bodyguard who murdered Philip, he's dead within seconds, cut down during his escape. Super convenient. Historians still argue whether Olympias had a hand in it, or maybe you knew more than you let on. Some say it was all a Persian plot. Others think Philip just insulted one too many people. But no matter the truth, the power vacuum is very real, and it's your job to fill it before someone else does. Step 1. Clean house. You move fast, ruthlessly fast. First, you secure the palace, send loyal troops to lock down the treasury, the barracks, the wine cellar, for morale, obviously. Then, you purge threats, like full Game of Thrones energy. Olympias helps. A lot. She personally sees to it that Cleopatra, the new wife, remember, and her infant are removed from the equation. Accidents, the court whispers. Divine justice, she hisses. You don't exactly stop her. Next, control the narrative. You ride to the assembly and speak. You don't plead, you command. You promise continuity, stability, victory against Persia, exactly what Philip wanted. You remind the men who your father was, and then you remind them who you are, the one who tamed Bucephalus, who led armies at 16, who learned from Aristotle himself. It works. The army declares its loyalty. The nobles bow. You're king in name and in reality. But hold the parade. Just weeks into your reign, revolts erupt. Greek city-states like Thebes and Athens see you as a weak boy wearing oversized armor. They think now's the time to shake off Macedonian rule. Sparta grumbles as usual. And up north, barbarian tribes smell blood. You don't panic. You saddle up. First north. You march to the Danube. Brutal country. Mountains, icy rivers, warriors who eat rocks for breakfast. You crush them. Swiftly. Efficiently. In one campaign, you win 3 battles, storm multiple forts, and force a peace that no one thought possible. You even build a bridge across the river just to show you can. It's not strategy. It's a flex. Quirky detail. Legend says you founded a city there just so you could name it after your dog. Yes, your dog. Historians are skeptical, but somewhere out there, a pile of ancient ruins may still whisper Peritas. Then south, like a storm. Thebes is next. They've declared independence and booted out your garrison. Athens watches, nervously chewing olives to see what you'll do. What do? You go full thunderbolt. You surround Thebes and give them a chance to surrender. They don't. Maybe they think you'll hesitate. Maybe they remember your age, not your campaigns. Mistake. You breach the walls in days. The fighting is fierce. By sunset, the city is gone, as in erased. You order it razed, buildings flattened, citizens sold into slavery. Only the temples and the house of the poet Pindar are spared. Poets, take note, flattery can save your life. Why so harsh? Because you need to send a message. One no city will misinterpret. Revolt, it says, and this happens. Athens gets the message. They quietly step back in line. Historians still argue whether the destruction of Thebes was necessary. Some call it a war crime. Others call it genius statecraft. You probably don't lose sleep over it. After that, no one doubts your power again. And now the long shadow of Persia. Your father had dreamed of invading it. Revenge for Marathon, for Thermopylae, for centuries of meddling. Now it's your turn to finish what he started. But you don't just plan a raid. You plan a conquest. An expedition, yes, but really a campaign to shake the pillars of the world. 30,000 troops gather at the Hellespont, the edge of Europe. You sacrifice to the gods. You throw offerings into the sea. Then you board the ship. Toward destiny. As you sail toward Asia, wind in your hair, bronze armor glinting, you pass the ruins of Troy. You disembark. You walk the sacred earth. You kneel before Achilles' supposed tomb. You're not here as a tourist. You take Achilles' shield from the temple, a symbolic gesture, technically sacrilegious, deeply on brand. You claim his legacy, and more. You whisper to the wind, watch me. You're 22, and you're about to invade the largest empire the world has ever known. The wind snaps the sails, the water below slaps against the hull, and you, standing at the prow of your ship, see Asia rising from the haze. Dusty hills, distant peaks, the faint smell of myrrh and sand. Behind you, 30,000 men hold their breath. Ahead, Persia, the mighty empire of gold, elephants, and kings who call themselves gods. You smile. You've read the histories. You've studied the maps. Now, you're going to redraw them. Your boots touch the Asian shore at Abydos, and your first act is pure Alexander. Dramatic, symbolic, and not at all subtle. You throw a spear into the sand, claiming the land as yours by right of conquest. The officers cheer. The Persians probably roll their eyes somewhere. You head straight for Troy, because why not start your campaign by invoking epic poetry? You visit the temple of Athena, you offer sacrifices, and of course, you leave behind your own armor and take a sacred shield supposedly used by Achilles. Is it real? Who knows? Historians still argue whether the relic was ceremonial or just good theater. But it looks awesome, and that's half the battle. First target, the Battle of the Granicus River. The Persians are waiting, led by satraps, regional governors who underestimate you. They see a young upstart, maybe too bold for his own good. What they don't expect is that you'll charge first, straight into the river, helmet gleaming, horse snorting, your companion cavalry thundering behind you. It's chaos. Mud, water, bronze clashing on bronze. You personally cut through Persian nobles like you're slicing honeycakes. A blow to your helmet nearly takes your head off, only saved by Cletus the Black, one of your fiercest generals. He lops off the attacker's arm mid-swing. You will owe Cletus later, dramatically. By the end, the Persians are routed. You lose a few dozen men. They lose thousands. And just like that, you've pierced the western edge of the empire. You're not here to plunder. You send spoils back to Athens, positioning yourself as the avenger of Greek honor. Even your enemies start to admire the spectacle. You're young, but not reckless. Brutal, but principled. when it suits your narrative. You bury the enemy dead with respect and commission statues for your fallen friends. Quirky detail? You refuse to eat or drink anything until you've honored the dead, not even a sip of wine. The troops notice. They whisper, "This one's not like other kings." Next, you sweep through Asia Minor like a brush fire. Cities open their gates. Some surrender, others resist and regret it immediately. You play it smart. You let local satraps keep their positions if they swear loyalty. Govern how you want, you tell them. Just send me taxes and troops. It's Empire Building 101, but with extra charisma. You reach Gordian, home of the legendary Knot. This one's a classic. Supposedly, whoever unties the Gordian Knot is destined to rule Asia. You stare at the tangled mess of rope and legend. Then, in true Alexander fashion, you take out your sword and slice through it. Boom. Prophecy fulfilled. Or, reinterpreted. Historians still argue whether you really cut it or figured out how to unravel it, but you definitely didn't wait around. Soon after, you hear news. King Darius III, ruler of Persia, is mobilizing a massive army. Not some satrap's half-baked militia. The army. Tens of thousands. Cavalry, chariots, archers, even war elephants. He's headed your way. The Persians expect you to retreat. You don't. Instead, you zigzag south along the coast, securing port cities and cutting off Persian naval supply lines. You realize that controlling the sea means controlling the flow of resources. It's brilliant. Boring, maybe, but brilliant. Your generals grumble. They want glory. You want control. But you won't avoid a showdown forever. At Issus, it happens. You're outnumbered, possibly 2-1. Darius has brought the full imperial flex, tens of thousands of infantry, elite cavalry, banners flapping, trumpets blaring. You camp on a narrow plain between the mountains and the sea. It's tight terrain, perfect for neutralizing Darius's numerical advantage. And then it begins. You ride up and down the lines, your cloak fluttering behind you. They fight for gold. You tell your men. You fight for glory? It's cheesy. It works. The air is thick with fear and sweat and the promise of eternal fame. You hit the Persians like a hammer. Again, your companion cavalry cuts through their flank. Again, you lead from the front, sword flashing, blood splashing, war cries echoing. Darius sees his lines buckling and, famously, flees the battlefield. Leaves behind his chariot, his camp, even his own mother and wife. Awkward. You capture his family and treat them with surprising kindness. No gloating, no parading them in chains. You house them in luxury, assure them their royal titles remain. Historians debate this move constantly. Was it strategic mercy, a show of class, or just good PR? Either way, the world takes note. You've now beaten the great king of Persia, twice. You control half the western provinces. Your name echoes from Athens to Babylon. Darius sends a peace offer. You can keep everything you've taken, marry his daughter, and rule the western half of his empire. You don't even read the whole letter. You're not here for half. You send it back with a polite, tell him if he wants to talk, he can come kneel in person. Savage. As your troops celebrate, you stare eastward, toward Egypt, Babylon, and the heart of Persia. You've crossed the river, broken the knot, scattered kings. And you're only getting started. You ride south, the sun now baking your bronze helmet, your cloak catching the desert wind like a red sail. The Persian army is reeling, its emperor humiliated, and the western provinces are yours for the taking. But you're not chasing Darius just yet. Instead, you veer toward the ancient sands of Egypt. Egypt, land of pyramids, gods with animal heads, and a 1,000-year tradition of eyeing conquerors like, "So, what makes you special?" But as you approach, you sense something different in the air. Respect. Maybe even anticipation. The Persians ruled Egypt, but no one liked it. So when you arrive in 332 BCE, instead of resistance, you get applause. Cities open their gates, priests bring offerings, people line the roads and cheer, not for a conqueror, but for a liberator. Or maybe just someone who isn't Persian. You roll into Memphis like you were born there, and the locals crown you pharaoh. No, really, they give you the full treatment. Feather fans, eyeliner, gold collars, and all. They say you're the son of Amun, the sky god. You don't argue. Actually, you lean into it hard. In fact, you take a detour, a long, sandy, slightly crazy detour, across the Libyan desert to visit the Oracle of Siwa. Why? Because you want answers. And maybe a little divine endorsement. It's a brutal trek, days through blistering heat, endless dunes, and the kind of silence that makes you question your life choices. At one point, you and your men nearly lose their way entirely until, allegedly, a pair of snakes guide you back on track. Because of course they do. You finally reach the Temple of Amun, nestled in an oasis like a mirage. Inside, the priests take one look at you and call you son of Zeus Ammon. Not welcome or how was your trip, but straight to divine being. You ask a private question. No one knows what it was. But whatever answer you get, it visibly changes you. You walk out looking like a man who just heard a whisper from eternity. Historians still argue what the oracle told you. Did it confirm your divinity? Your destiny? Or just remind you to drink more water? No one knows. But from that moment on, you're no longer just a king. You're Alexander, child of gods. You return to Egypt with new purpose. You oversee the founding of a brand new city, Alexandria. Strategically placed at the mouth of the Nile, it's designed to be a jewel of learning, commerce, and culture. You sketch the city plan yourself, no joke, using grain to outline the walls. Birds eat half of it. Your men panic. You laugh it off, an omen of future prosperity. Quirky fact, Alexandria would become one of the greatest cities in history. At its height, it houses the famous library, where scrolls outnumber people, and the Lighthouse of Pharaoh, one of the 7 wonders. You don't live to see it. But hey, vision counts. Egypt secured, you now march east again. You know Darius is regrouping. You know he'll try one more grand defense. And you're right. In 331 BCE, he draws up his forces at a place called Gaugamela. This isn't just a battle. It's the Super Bowl of ancient warfare. Darius brings everything. 200,000 men, maybe more. Scythed chariots, cavalry, and an army that stretches beyond the horizon. Your scouts report the terrain is flat, perfect for Persian tactics. Most generals would groan. You smirk. Before the battle, you perform sacrifices. You speak to your troops. You call them not mercenaries, but brothers. You remind them that this isn't about plunder. It's about legacy. You're not stealing an empire. You're replacing it. Then you sleep. Seriously. The night before, you're so chill your staff has to wake you up in the morning. The Battle of Gaugamela begins with dust, miles of it. The ground trembles. Darius's chariots screech forward, blades spinning, horses foaming. You counter with genius. You shift your lines, absorb the hit, then punch through a weak spot in the Persian center. Your cavalry wheels behind the enemy, your phalanx grinds forward, and you, on Bucephalus as always, spot Darius. Just there, beyond the chaos. You charge. Again, Darius sees the glint of your helmet, hears the thunder of your hooves, and panics. Again, he flees. Again. The battle collapses. The Persians are crushed. You win not just the fight, but the war. Babylon surrenders. Susa follows. You march through the capital cities of Persia like a man collecting keys. In Susa, you find treasure so massive that it takes thousands of camels to haul it. Gold, silver, gems, it's wealth beyond comprehension. But you're not distracted. You head for Persepolis, the symbolic heart of the empire. It's decadent, opulent, and steeped in Persian glory. You enter it as a king and contemplate its meaning. Then you burn it down. Maybe it's revenge for the Persian sack of Athens 150 years earlier. Maybe it's wine-fueled rage. Or maybe you just want to send a message. This era is over. Historians still argue whether it was deliberate policy or drunken impulse. The flames lick the sky. Columns crack. Statues melt. You stand before the fire, silent. The Achaemenid Empire, once the greatest the world had ever known, is no more. And yet you don't stop. You could. Everyone says so. Your men beg for rest. You've won. You have more land than any Greek ever dreamed of. But you're not done. You want Darius, the man you've chased across continents, because deep down, you know this story needs an ending. And you're going to write it. The desert stretches before you like a bleached parchment, and the footprints of your army etch new lines in the ancient dust. You've conquered Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, ripped the very heart from the Persian Empire, and still you press eastward. Because Darius is not dead. And you're a man who finishes stories. The trail leads deeper into the Iranian plateau, through mountain passes and hostile territories. Darius is fleeing for his life, and as he runs, his empire crumbles behind him. Satraps defect. Governors abandon their posts. Some try to bargain. Some try to hide. A few, in a moment of serious miscalculation, try to fight you. You crush them all. Along the way, you meet resistance at the Zagros Mountains, rugged, narrow trails where every step feels like it might be your last. But your army is disciplined now, forged by heat, dust, and years of shared hardship. They no longer see themselves as Macedonians or Greeks. They're Alexander's men. That's an identity now, like being Spartan or Spartan adjacent, just with slightly better hair. Then, finally, news. Darius has been betrayed. Bessus, one of his own satraps and a relative, has taken him captive, declared himself king, and is retreating into Bactria, which is sort of like saying he ran into the fog and dared you to follow him off a cliff. You know that killing Darius yourself would bring closure. But now Bessus has stolen that moment, and with it, your chance to symbolically end the war with your own sword. You pursue anyway. It's a brutal chase through the highlands of modern-day Iran. Your troops grow thinner, supplies are erratic, and still, you ride. You ride because Darius must not vanish into a legend. He must fall for the story to end properly. Then, one morning, your scouts find a royal litter, abandoned on the side of the road. Inside lies Darius, wounded, stabbed, dying. You kneel beside the man you've hunted for years. He's pale, bloodied, and barely breathing. And when he sees you, not Bessus, he smiles. In his final breaths, he thanks you for your mercy toward his family. He begs you to avenge him. He dies in your arms. Yeah, that happened. Quirky footnote. You give him a full royal funeral, wrap him in purple, return his body to Persepolis, and lay him to rest like a true king. Historians still argue whether it was respect or politics, but there's no question. You mourn him. Then you turn, and you go after Bessus like a thunderbolt. It takes months. Bactria is not built for conquest. It's rough, remote, and fiercely independent. But you track Bessus down, capture him, and stage a spectacular trial. For treason? Yes. For regicide? Also yes. But really? For messing with your narrative. You execute Bessus, slow and public. Maybe a little too public. Your court starts to get nervous. You're getting intense. Not cruel, exactly. Just utterly unwilling to share the spotlight. Meanwhile, something else is happening. You're starting to go native. Not in the loincloth and nose ring way. More like you're adopting Persian customs. You wear their robes. You sit on their thrones. You expect people to bow before you. Proskinesis, the traditional act of kneeling and touching your head to the floor. Your Macedonian officers? Hate it. They see it as a betrayal. You were one of them. Rough, simple, sword and sandals. Now you're strutting around in silk, wearing a tiara, and letting eunuchs announce your arrival. Still, you double down. You marry Roxana, a noblewoman from Bactria. She's clever, poised, and stunning. Your army murmurs, really? A foreigner? But you don't care. This isn't a love story. It's a merger. You're fusing East and West, a new world, a new identity. Alexander the Great, now emperor of both Greece and Persia. At this point, you could stop, settle, rule your kingdom like a normal superhuman god king. But no, you point farther east toward India, because why stop at the edges of the known world when you could redraw the known world entirely? Your generals look at you like you've lost it. They've marched thousands of miles, buried friends, missed weddings, children, and at least one harvest festival. But you're possessed, so east you go. You cross the Hindu Kush, a terrifying journey. It's snow, cliffs, and the kind of thin air that makes even Bucephalus wheeze. Your troops curse your name. Some desert, others die. Still, you climb. And then you descend into lush valleys and strange lands, where elephants replace horses and kings ride into battle on gilded towers. Welcome to India. It's humid, colorful, loud. Everything smells like spice and sandalwood. And waiting for you is King Porus, a ruler with a spine like steel and arms like tree trunks. He meets you at the Hydaspes River and refuses to back down. You smile. Finally, a worthy opponent. The battle is wet, muddy, and glorious. Porus unleashes war elephants, massive armored beasts that stomp and gore like living battering rams. Your men panic, horses rear, the line shatters, but you adapt. You lure the elephants, break their formation, and flank with precision. It's brutal. No subtlety here, just pure willpower. At one point, you're fighting knee-deep in blood and water, soaked to the skin, screaming orders above the trumpet of war elephants. You win, but barely. After the battle, you summon Porus. He arrives, wounded but proud. How would you like to be treated? You ask. Like a king, he replies. You laugh, and you grant it. Not only do you let him keep his lands, you expand them. Historians agree, Porus earned your respect more than most of your generals ever did. But your men? They've had enough. They gather, silent and grim, at the banks of the Hyphasis River. You propose going farther, into the endless jungles, toward more conquest. They say no, not angrily, not rebelliously, just no. And for once you listen, not because you want to, but because you have to. So here you are, standing at the edge of the known world, India behind you, the Hyphasis River murmuring at your feet, and a line of silent soldiers refusing to take one more step. You're used to obedience, not mutiny. But this isn't defiance. They're just tired. Tired of marching, tired of bleeding, tired of chasing phantoms across the horizon. You stare east for a long time. Somewhere out there, more kingdoms await. Riches, glory, temples carved into cliffsides. But your men won't follow. And even you, in that strange quiet moment, can almost admit that maybe, just maybe, they've earned a pause. You agree to turn back. But of course, you don't do anything halfway. Instead of retracing your path, you decide to carve a new one home, straight through the Gedrosian desert. Because why take the safe road when you can gamble with dehydration, sandstorms, and the occasional angry scorpion? Your officers beg you to reconsider. This desert is infamous. Even Cyrus the Great, a Persian hero, once lost an entire army here. You're confident, overconfident. One might even say dangerously inspired. And so, the march begins. The Gedrosian desert is not sand dunes and camel postcards. It's endless gravel plains, blistering heat, winds like knives, wells that turn out to be mirages. Your men drop like flies, camels collapse, horses foam and die. You ration water, strip the baggage train, and still, people perish by the thousands. Some historians argue this was a test, a brutal loyalty check to purge the weak and reward the faithful. Others say it was a massive miscalculation. Maybe you just didn't realize how cruel nature can be. Maybe, for once, the earth refused to bend to your will. Still, you survive. Barely. When you finally emerge, sunburnt and ghost-thin, you're met by the fleets of Nearchus, your naval commander, who sailed from the Indus to the Persian Gulf. He tells you of storms, hostile shores, and narrow escapes. But the fleets survive too. Together, you reunite army and navy in Carmania, modern-day southern Iran, and you throw a party. No joke, a full-on multi-day drinking, feasting, music-blasting party. It's part celebration, part survival ritual, part we just barely made it catharsis. You dress like Dionysus, crown of ivy, wine in hand, and ride in a golden chariot pulled by goats. Probably. Some say the revelry was to boost morale. Others think you were celebrating that your gamble didn't kill everyone. Historians still argue whether this was pure self-indulgence or a necessary reset button. Regardless, it works. You continue west, returning through Persia with a new idea in your head. Not just empire, unity. You've conquered countless cities, but you haven't merged your worlds yet. So you try. You hold mass weddings at Susa. Thousands of Macedonian soldiers marry Persian women in a grand ceremony. You marry again, too, this time 2 daughters of Darius himself. It's politics, yes, but also symbolism. You want your soldiers to see Persia as home, not just loot. The gesture? Mixed results. Some soldiers settle down, others grumble. Many divorce their new brides the moment you're gone. Turns out forcing cross-cultural harmony overnight is ambitious. At the same time, you launch a bold reform. You start training Persians for the army. They learn Macedonian drills, wear Greek armor, even speak some Greek. You call them the epigone, the successors. Your veterans are not thrilled. They see this as betrayal. You're replacing them with the very people they fought. They remember battles, lost brothers, Persian arrows whistling past their ears. You remind them, this was always the vision. One world, one people, one army. But deep down, you feel it too. Something's changed. You're not the wide-eyed prince anymore. Not the clever student of Aristotle. You're harder, more regal, maybe lonelier. And then, Hephaestion dies. Hephaestion, your closest friend, your general, your soulmate in every way that matters. Some say he dies of fever. Others whisper poison. But the result is the same. You break. You don't eat. You don't speak. You tear your clothes and shave your head. You order shrines built, cities renamed. You spend a fortune on his funeral, burn incense across continents, and decree a national mourning. Quirky fact, you even ask the oracle at Siwa if Hephaestion can be declared a god. They diplomatically suggest he might qualify as a divine hero. Not quite full Olympus material, but close. The grief leaves a scar. You still push forward, planning campaigns into Arabia, drafting maps, refining administration, but your spark flickers. And then you fall ill. It starts with a fever, a small one, maybe malaria, maybe typhoid. Some say poison. Others blame exhaustion, heartbreak, or divine punishment. Historians still argue what killed you. All anyone knows is you collapse. In Babylon, 323 BCE, just shy of your 33rd birthday, you lie in your bed, surrounded by generals who whisper and argue over your body like vultures circling a still-breathing lion. You can't speak, but when asked who should succeed you, you whisper, "To the strongest." Classic. You die soon after. The greatest conqueror of the ancient world. The man who rewrote geography with a sword. No clear air, no easy peace, and the world, it fractures. But that's not your story anymore. That's the story of those left behind. Yours? Yours is the story of how far one man can go before even the world becomes too small. Your body lies cold in Babylon, but the world you've shaped doesn't get a moment to breathe. You didn't name an heir. And that was a choice. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe you really thought someone would rise, someone worthy. Or maybe you believed no one could follow in your footsteps. Either way, your generals are left blinking in the sunlight of a world suddenly missing its sun. They gather around your deathbed like wolves circling a fallen alpha. Each one with claims, loyalties, sharp knives tucked under their cloaks, political, literal, or both. Perdiccas, your trusted officer, takes the reins, sort of. He claims you gave him your signet ring. That's enough for now, but others don't buy it. Antipater, back in Macedonia. Seleucus, in Babylon. Ptolemy, eyeing Egypt. They all want pieces. Meanwhile, your wives, yes, plural, are pregnant. Roxana, the Bactrian noble, gives birth to a boy, Alexander IV. He's declared your heir. The problem? He's still nursing. So Perdiccas becomes regent for the baby king. But not for long. Because the moment your body stops breathing, your empire starts tearing. You probably saw this coming. Remember when you tried to merge East and West? When you married Persians, trained locals, wore robes that made your Macedonians squint? Well, now, the backlash hits like a sandstorm with opinions. Your generals ditch the fusion plan. They divorce their Persian wives. They strip local officers of power. The dream of a blended empire shatters like a dropped amphora. And while they argue, your body sits unburied. Yup, for 2 years. Because everyone wants to possess it. You were more than a king. You were a symbol. And symbols, well, they make great PR. Ptolemy makes the boldest move. He steals your body en route to Macedonia and hauls it to Egypt, building a golden tomb in Alexandria. It becomes a pilgrimage site, a marvel, a way for him to say, "Hey, look, I was closest to the god king." Historians still argue whether your body was preserved in honey or white lead. Either way, it stayed unnervingly intact for centuries. Roman emperors visited. Caligula supposedly stole your breastplate. Augustus gazed at your face through glass. And then the tomb vanished. No one knows where it is today. One of the greatest mysteries of ancient history. Your body, gone, just like your dream. But the world you left, it changes forever. Let's talk fallout. Your generals, now known as the Diadochi or successors, plunge into decades of civil war. Some claim territory, some claim thrones, some claim divine backing. The empire you built with blood and vision splits into 3 main pieces. Ptolemaic Egypt, under Ptolemy. That's the one with Cleopatra, eventually. Lots of eyeliner and very dramatic exits. Seleucid Asia, ruled by Seleucus. It's vast, messy, and constantly under pressure from internal revolts and spicy Greek-Persian cultural tension. Antigonid Macedonia, held by Antigonus's descendants, until Rome comes knocking with a taste for annexation and togas. Your son, Alexander IV, never rules. He's murdered, along with Roxana, by Cassander, another power-hungry general who decides baby kings are too much work. It's brutal, it's heartbreaking, and it's exactly the kind of tragic poetry your life attracted. Still, the chaos leaves fingerprints on everything. Greek becomes the lingua franca across the known world. From Egypt to India, markets buzz with merchants yelling in Koine Greek about olives, dates, and overpriced amphorae. Your cities, Alexandria's, dozens of them, become hubs of learning, trade, and culture. The biggest? Alexandria, Egypt. It becomes the crown jewel of the Mediterranean. A city of marble colonnades, towering lighthouses, and the legendary library, home to scrolls from every corner of your former empire. Here's a fringe detail. Rumor has it, any ship that docked in Alexandria had its books confiscated, copied, and added to the collection. Which is bold, and a little rude, but very on brand for a city trying to preserve all knowledge. Your legacy becomes a paradox. To some, you're a civilizer, a bringer of Greek thought, democracy light, and urban planning. To others, you're a destroyer. a warlord with a god complex who burned Persepolis and scattered cultures like playing cards. Historians still argue whether your empire was progress or plunder. But it was something immense, something magnetic. Your legend grows until it's almost myth. In medieval Europe, you're Alexander the Blessed, a paragon of chivalry. In Persian lore, you become Iskander, a hero and sometimes a villain. In Islamic tradition, you're Zulkarnain, he of the two horns, a figure of wisdom and power. Everyone claims you, bends your story to their own. That's the curse of legends. They stop belonging to you. But not everything breaks. Your vision, the idea that the world could be one vast interconnected web, isn't dead, just dormant. It flickers in Alexandria's scholars, in Roman roads, in Byzantine trade, in Arab philosophers who translate Greek texts centuries later. You planted a seed. It just needed time. Oh, and let's not forget Bucephalus, your horse, your companion, your battle-scarred bestie. When he died in India, you didn't just mourn. You founded a city in his honor, Bucephala. Most generals leave statues. You left urban infrastructure. Talk about love. So what happens next? The Roman Empire borrows heavily from your blueprint. Julius Caesar weeps at your statue. Napoleon dreams of your tactics. Modern generals quote you. Philosophers dissect you. Artists paint you. You are unavoidable. The man who wept because there were no more worlds to conquer? Well, turns out you were the world. You're gone now, physically at least. But your aftershocks ripple for centuries. Let's zoom in on what your empire actually did to the world, beyond the flashy battles and dramatic last words. It's easy to forget, but before your arrival, most people never traveled more than a few miles from their birthplace. Most kingdoms were local, languages were locked into valleys, and cultures clung tightly to what they knew. You smashed that wide open. Wherever your army went, they built cities, not just fortresses or trading posts, but fully functioning Hellenistic urban centers. Greek theaters, temples to Zeus, gymnasiums where people exercised an awkwardly debated philosophy while very naked, markets and government buildings. And of course, statues of you, everywhere. You weren't humble in marble. You didn't just spread politics. You spread ideas, philosophy, art, mathematics, astronomy, even medicine. These things didn't just travel, they collided. Take Bactria, for example. That's roughly modern Afghanistan. Under your rule and your successors, it became a place where Greek sculptors met Buddhist monks. No, really. The result? Greco-Buddhist art. Buddha statues with curly hair and togas. A literal blending of East and West carved in stone. Historians still argue whether this was cultural enrichment or intellectual imperialism, but either way, it's stunning. Your empire also turbocharged trade. Suddenly, goods could move from the Nile to the Indus. Spices, silk, papyrus, ivory, wine, Greek pottery, Indian steel, all zipping around thanks to the infrastructure you left behind. You didn't just build cities, you linked them. Think of it like the ancient version of globalization, minus the Wi-Fi and plus a lot more camels. And with trade came stories. Myths, legends, and rumors flowed just as fast. People in India started hearing about Heracles. Greeks debated the nature of the soul with Zoroastrians. A man in Babylon might wear Persian robes and read Homer. Cultures didn't just meet. They married, argued, threw olive oil at each other, and gave birth to entirely new ones. Even your enemies couldn't escape your gravity. The Parthians, who took over parts of your empire centuries later, adapted your administrative style. They used Greek on their coins, copied your military tactics, and claimed they were finishing what you started. In short, your ghost had excellent branding. But not all the ripples were tidy or noble. Remember how you wanted to merge East and West? Well, for the elite Greeks and Macedonians left behind, this often translated to one-sided superiority. They brought in Greek theater, but didn't always bother learning local scripts. They built cities, but often displaced native populations. They minted coins with Athena's face on them. In provinces that already had goddesses, thank you very much. There's even a bit of dark comedy here. In some cities, local rulers adopted Greek names and built temples to Olympian gods, all while secretly praying to their own deities on the side. It was like wearing a toga over traditional robes and hoping no one noticed. Some scholars call it selective Hellenization. Others call it survival. And while the elites debated dialects, ordinary people, farmers, merchants, soldiers, just lived. They bartered goods in hybrid markets, attended mixed festivals, learned enough Greek to get by, and shrugged when yet another Alexander statue popped up in the town square. Fun fringe fact: you made Alexander the most overused baby name from Greece to Pakistan for centuries. There were probably Alexanders herding goats, baking bread, and awkwardly asking girls to the local theater dance in at least 3 languages. And then there's Alexandria, your namesake city in Egypt. It didn't just thrive, it flourished. The Library of Alexandria becomes a legend. It's said to have housed over 400,000 scrolls at its peak. Think of it like the ancient version of the internet, except without cat videos and a lot more papyrus. People traveled from all over the world just to study there. Euclid worked on geometry. Archimedes tinkered with physics. Ptolemaic astronomers charted the stars and realized the Earth might just revolve around the sun. Crazy, right? And they did it in a city you ordered built on a marshy piece of coastline. Historians still argue whether you actually designed Alexandria yourself or just barked, "Build it big and near the sea," and moved on to planning your next battle. But no one argues its impact. It became the intellectual engine of the ancient world, a lighthouse, literally and figuratively. Speaking of that lighthouse, it was one of the 7 wonders. The Pharos of Alexandria, towering over 300 feet tall, it guided ships safely into the harbor for over 1,000 years. It used mirrors and sunlight long before lasers were cool, and it stood as a physical metaphor for what you were trying to do: illuminate the world. But even you couldn't control the future. Eventually, the library burned, multiple times depending on which account you trust. Julius Caesar might have started one of the fires. Later emperors neglected it. Scrolls were lost, knowledge faded. Your cities? Many were abandoned. Some vanished beneath sand. Others were renamed, reabsorbed, or replaced by new empires. Yet your name remained. In pop culture, in politics, in chess. Yup, there's a great Alexander strategy. In the 2004 movie where Colin Farrell wore a confusing blonde wig and Angelina Jolie played your mother even though she was only a year older. You're the meme that never dies. But here's the thing. Despite the mess, despite the blood and ambition and sheer chaos of it all, people remembered you. They remembered how you charged across rivers without flinching, how you studied Homer by firelight, how you wept when there were no more worlds to conquer, and how, for a moment, the entire known world knelt to a man who believed it could be won. You're still there, in every conqueror's mirror. They all stare into your reflection, hoping to glimpse a sliver of your fire, maybe even convince themselves they've got what it takes. But let's be honest, nobody really does. Julius Caesar, for instance, visits your tomb in Alexandria and reportedly weeps. Not out of grief, but frustration. He's over 30 and hasn't conquered even a quarter of what you did by 25. Slacker. He even leaves flowers on your body, which, by the way, still hasn't decayed. It's embalmed and gleaming under glass. Creepy? Yes. Powerful PR move? Absolutely. Napoleon? Same obsession. When his troops stumble upon the remnants of Alexandria in 1798, he supposedly stands there imagining himself your reincarnation. The same imperial fire, the same need to redraw maps with your name at the center. Even Hitler had a thing for you. Though that's a sentence that immediately makes the room colder. He reportedly carried around a copy of a biography about you, trying to understand how charisma and sheer will could bend nations. Spoiler, he missed the point. Because for all your storms, you weren't just force, you were vision. You believed in something. Sure, it was messy and maybe a little manic, but it wasn't empty conquest. You weren't collecting flags or statues, you were testing the limits of possibility. And there's something magnetic about that. Here's a quirky detail. In Ethiopia, legends evolved saying you were the ancestor of their kings. In medieval Europe, some texts claimed you'd explored the heavens in a flying machine. And in the East, stories say you built a wall to keep out Gog and Magog, 2 apocalyptic troublemakers destined to return at the end of days. You become myth, prophet, monster, hero. You're not even Alexander anymore. You're everywhere. Which brings us to the heart of the strange afterlife of a world conqueror. The Alexander romance. Oh yeah, it's not just a genre. It's a centuries-spanning literary phenomenon, a collection of stories, wildly fictional, deeply entertaining, often bizarre, that retell your life in increasingly magical, implausible ways. You're battling dragons, finding hidden lands, conversing with talking trees that predict your doom. You descend into the ocean in a glass submarine. You ride a chariot pulled by griffins. And yes, you get a talking horse. Bucephalus always comes back, no matter the canon. Some versions even claim you searched for the fountain of youth and almost found it, until one of your soldiers accidentally drank the water first. Rude. Historians still argue whether this mythologizing was the deliberate attempt at propaganda or just the world's way of grieving someone who did the impossible. But the result is the same. You evolve into a cultural shapeshifter. People rewrite you to fit their needs. Christian monks turned you into a moral parable. Muslim poets made you a seeker of divine wisdom. Medieval kings said, "See, we descend from Alexander," like a cosmic flex at dinner parties. Even in modern Greece, your image is complicated. Some revere you as a national hero. Others debate his treatment of the conquered. And north of the border, in what is now North Macedonia, you've become a political lightning rod. Statues, flags, national identities swirling around a man who's been dead for over 2 millennia, all because you never settled. You never shrank. And people can't let go of that. Now let's rewind a bit, because there's one part we've only hinted at. Your mom, Olympias, the real MVP of your origin story. If ambition had a patron saint, it would be her. She wasn't just your mother. She was your fuel, your schemer, your fiercest advocate and occasional curse. She told you that you were descended from Achilles, that your real father might be Zeus, that you were meant for greatness. And when people doubted it, she made sure they never doubted again. There's a fringe theory, totally unprovable but irresistibly juicy, that she was involved in your father Philip's assassination. One moment, he's strolling confidently at a wedding. The next, he's stabbed by his own bodyguard, who, let's be honest, might have been coached. And who benefits? You, the 20-year-old with a razor-sharp mind and a mother whispering destiny in his ear. Olympias didn't fade after your death either. She held on, hard. She protected your son, Alexander IV, as long as she could. She entered power struggles, ordered executions, fought her own war of legacy against your old generals. Eventually, she was captured and killed, but not before she became a political legend in her own right. And speaking of women in your world, here's something people rarely talk about: the Persian women you married. Roxana, Statira, Parysatis. They weren't just romantic conquests. They were political chess moves. You weren't in love with them, though some say you did fall for Roxana, but you used them to tie yourself to the Persian royal line. Problem is, after your death, those women were trapped in a web of politics sharper than any sword. Roxana and your son? Executed. The others? Vanished into silence, if they even survived the fallout. Because in the wake of your dream collapsing, the world wasn't gentle to those who once stood closest to your flame. It's strange to think, isn't it? That for all your myth, your genius, your divine aura, you left behind a trail of vulnerable people who bore the cost of your brilliance. But maybe that's the price of being legendary. You set the sky on fire, and everyone too near got burned. And now we're getting close to the moment when your empire fractures like a dropped vase. You die in Babylon, your body barely cold before the vultures, also known as your generals, begin circling. You left no clear heir, just a baby growing inside Roxana and a mentally challenged half-brother named Aristeus. Let's be honest, not the ideal succession plan. Historians still argue whether you whispered any name on your deathbed. Some claim you said, "to the strongest," which is either poetic or wildly irresponsible. Others believe you never said anything at all, just lay there, eyes open, as the weight of the world slid off your shoulders. But everyone agrees what happened next: chaos. These weren't just officers. They were titans, men who had followed you across deserts, stormed cities, stared down elephants, and probably shared one too many questionable campfire meals. But unity? That evaporates the moment your breath does. They call themselves the Diadochi, your successors. Spoiler alert, they mostly just murder each other. Let's run the highlight reel. Perdiccas tries to hold the empire together at first, as regent for your unborn son. Ambitious, disciplined, a little full of himself. But the others don't want unity. They want slices. He's assassinated within a few years, drowned by his own mutinous soldiers while crossing a river. Rough. Ptolemy grabs Egypt. Smart move. It's rich, relatively stable, and easy to defend. He also steals your body, Yes, literally hijacks your funeral procession and diverts it to Alexandria, where he entombs you like a pharaoh. Power flex of the century. Cassander takes Macedonia and Greece. Antigonus grabs most of Asia Minor. Lysimachus controls Thrace. Seleucus ends up ruling Persia and the eastern satrapies. It's like your empire turned into a very bloody board game. And your poor son, Alexander IV? He's shuffled from city to city like a royal football until Cassander has him quietly murdered, possibly smothered or poisoned before his teenage years. Roxana vanishes soon after, another name erased by ambition. You'd think this empire-splintering mess would end fast, but nope, it drags on for decades. Wars of the Diadochi rage from about 322 to 281 BCE. That's over 40 years of betrayals, shifting alliances, surprise assassinations, and battles with names like Ipsus and Corupadium. It's like Game of Thrones, but without dragons or plot resolution. And all of it in your name. Your generals weren't just fighting for land, they were fighting to inherit your image. They issued coins with your face, built cities with your name, claimed they were executing your vision. Even when they hated each other, they agreed on one thing. No one could top Alexander. Let's pause here for a very fringe tidbit. In one lesser-known account, Antigonus Monophthalmus, the one-eyed, literally claimed to have received divine dreams sent by your ghost. Whether he actually believed that or was just trying to win followers is up for debate. Either way, ancient politics really leaned into ghost endorsements. Meanwhile, your cities kept humming. Alexandria in Egypt? Blossoming. Seleucia on the Tigris? Thriving. Your urban legacy survived even as your generals shredded the borders you drew. Local elites adapted. Greek became the language of administration and commerce, stretching all the way to India. If you walked through a market in Bactria around 280 BCE, you'd hear a merchant haggling in Greek, Persian, and maybe even Sanskrit, all while selling olive oil and silk next to Buddhist scrolls. You created something no one could unmake, a blended world. But it came at a cost. Let's not sugarcoat it. You left behind a path of scorched cities and shattered kingdoms. You destabilized power balances that had stood for centuries. Your campaigns caused famine, displacement, and death on a massive scale. Still, somehow, people forgive you, even admire you. Because despite everything, there's something awe-inspiring about someone who actually tried to rule the world, not as a tyrant, but as a visionary. You weren't just making war. You were sculpting civilization with a sword and a scroll. Even now, scholars argue over what your empire was meant to be. Was it a Greek kingdom in Asian clothes? Was it the first true global state? Or just a very large Macedonian tantrum stretched over a decade? And why did it collapse so quickly? Some blame your personality. Too fast, too intense, too centralized around you. Others say it was inevitable. Empires without strong institutions always fall. You can't hold together 1,000,000 square miles with charisma and cavalry alone. Still, the echoes lasted. The Seleucid Empire would endure for nearly 250 years. The Ptolemies in Egypt, almost 300, with the last queen being the one and only Cleopatra. Yes, that Cleopatra. She spoke Greek, ruled from your city, and even visited your tomb. And your name? It became shorthand for greatness. Parents named their sons after you. Poets wrote odes. Warriors carried your likeness into battle centuries after your death. You weren't just remembered. You were reinvented, again and again. Let's add one more fun twist. In some medieval Islamic traditions, you were folded into the identity of Dul Qarnayn, a righteous ruler mentioned in the Quran who traveled to the ends of the earth and built a wall to keep out evil forces. Some say it's not you. Others insist it is. Either way, it's another realm where your legend found a home. Because here's the real magic. Your story won't stay still. It bends, it adapts, it refuses to die. And in that sense, your dream came true after all. Not the borders, not the cities, the idea. The idea that one person, driven by sheer belief, could alter the trajectory of the world. That a boy from the hills of Macedon could become a myth stitched into the skin of 1,000 cultures. And that's a conquest no war can ever undo. You'd think, after all that blood, dust, and divine PR, your story would settle. But no, you're still on the move, centuries after your bones were boxed up like a collector's item, still gliding through history like some golden phantom, and your legend keeps shapeshifting. Let's walk a bit slower here. You deserve that now. See, your legacy enters new rooms over time, quietly, like incense. or like the whisper of armor against marble. In the Roman world, you're the gold standard for what a leader should be. Julius Caesar visits your tomb, sure, but Augustus goes one further. He carries a small portrait of you in his seal ring. That's personal. That's obsession. Emperors in Rome routinely compare themselves to you, knowing they'll fall short. Trajan? He gets close, pushing Roman boundaries into Mesopotamia. But even he doesn't make it to the Indus. You always remain one step beyond reach. Now glide into the Middle Ages. Europe, crumbling after Rome's fall, clings to stories of kings who could fix everything. Kings who conquered not just land, but meaning. That's you, repackaged. In medieval bestiaries, you're battling monsters on the edge of the world. In illuminated manuscripts, you float above the earth in a chariot drawn by griffins. One Byzantine tale has you ride into heaven and punch the moon. Honestly, we'd pay to watch that movie. Historians still argue whether these bizarre expansions of your story were pure fantasy or coded critiques of the times. Either way, they stuck. And in the Islamic Golden Age, scholars like Al-Tabari and poets like Ferdowsi continue your afterlife in grand epics. You're Iskandar, the philosopher king. You debate with sages, seek eternal wisdom, and build walls against demonic hordes. Did you actually do any of this? Obviously not. But here's the thing. Nobody cares anymore, because the legend of you had long outpaced the facts. Even today, archaeologists argue over the location of your tomb. That's right, we've lost you, or at least we've lost your final resting place. Some say you're still in Alexandria, buried beneath a forgotten church or mosque. Others believe your body was moved multiple times, looted, hidden, reburied. There's even a theory, fringe but persistent, that your remains were mistaken for those of St. Mark and smuggled to Venice. Imagine the saints having brunch in heaven, and one of them's just you. Awkward. People are still hunting for your bones like some glittering holy grail. But maybe you wouldn't want to be found. Maybe being missing is part of the myth, part of the magic, because you're more powerful as an absence than as a relic. In fact, you've inspired more quests dead than you ever did alive. People have crossed deserts, scanned ancient texts, bribed locals, and chased legends for centuries, hoping to glimpse where you sleep, and not one of them has succeeded. Meanwhile, your name has spread farther than your armies ever did. There are dozens of cities still named Alexandria today, from Egypt to Afghanistan, from Pakistan to the Balkans. Not all are still bustling capitals, but each marks a place where your shadow once stood. And your language? You helped make Greek the common tongue of commerce, art, and science across a huge swath of the ancient world. You didn't just conquer cultures, you fused them. That blend, Greek logic, Persian opulence, Egyptian ritual, Indian philosophy, it became the stew from which the Hellenistic world emerged, and it influenced everything that came after: Roman architecture, Christian theology, Islamic astronomy, even Renaissance humanism. One man, one meteoric life, echoing through institutions and ideas for 2,000 years. And not just in textbooks. In pop culture, you still show up. Movies, video games, graphic novels. You're in strategy games where players reenact your campaigns. You're a boss fight, a mentor, a tragic antihero. You've been voiced by Hollywood's best and worst accents alike. People want to be you, or at least dress like you for Halloween. And speaking of modern weirdness, here's your quirky tidbit for this round. In 2004, Iran produced an epic movie called Alexander, where you're portrayed as a wild-eyed megalomaniac invader, which, to be fair, is one possible reading of your resume. Perspective is everything. To Western thinkers, you're often a luminous genius. To Persian writers, sometimes a tyrant. In Indian traditions, a curious blip, an arrogant outsider ultimately outwitted by local kings. And in Central Asia, you're a folk hero, a traveler, sometimes even a prophet. What you actually were? That's slippery, because you're not just a historical figure anymore. You're a canvas. People project onto you what they need: courage, ambition, tragedy, wisdom, madness. You contain multitudes. You're a choose-your-own-adventure wrapped in bronze and silk. And yet at the core of it all, you remain one person. A young man who stared at a map and said, "Why not everything?" Who dared the world to stop him and found, to his surprise, that it mostly didn't. You had flaws, monumental ones. You were violent, impulsive, paranoid. You drank too much, trusted too little, burned hot, and died young. And yet, you were also curious, brilliant, bold in a way the world has rarely seen since. You didn't just rule an empire. You imagined a new kind of empire, one that blended east and west, that questioned the lines on maps and between people. That dream didn't last, but the idea of it did. And maybe that's why people still whisper your name. Because you weren't perfect. You were possible. And in a world that often feels small and stuck, you remind us of what humans can do when they reach just a little too far. You'd think by now we'd reach the edge of your world. But Alexander, you keep echoing. Even now, centuries removed, your name sparks arguments in university lounges and internet rabbit holes alike. Was your legacy mostly destruction or progress? Did you lay the groundwork for unity, or just make a loud, glorious mess? Historians still argue whether you meant to create a global culture, or whether you were just winging it, chasing glory like a caffeinated college student rewriting an essay at 3 a.m. with 0 footnotes. It's a fair question. You talked about unity, but your actions, well, they often involved fire. Still, something undeniably shifted in your wake. You didn't just pass through the world, you changed it. In some places, permanently. Take art. Before you, Persian and Greek styles had their own clear personalities, one intricate, the other idealized. But in the decades after your campaigns, sculptors started mixing influences. You'd see a statue with Greek muscle and a Persian beard, or Buddhist temples that looked suspiciously like Greek amphitheaters. Even in religion, cross-pollination bloomed. Your image itself, wavy hair, far-off stare, that lion-like twist of the neck, became a visual shorthand for heroism. Coins carried your face long after your death. Some rulers even adopted your hairstyle, like fans mimicking their idol on TikTok. Only, in togas. Let's not forget science. Thanks to the Hellenistic cities you planted, scholars from Egypt to India had places to meet, argue, and write things down. Alexandria's library, arguably the most ambitious data hoarding operation until Google, became a beacon for thinkers across 3 continents. It's wild to think your conquests helped preserve Babylonian star charts and Egyptian surgical texts, which would later be translated, copied, and studied by Islamic scholars, then rediscovered by Renaissance thinkers. Your ripple effects helped keep the ancient world talking to itself long after it should have gone silent. And while we're at it, your name, Alexander. It means defender of men. Kind of ironic, considering how many cities you torched and how many walls you broke down. But still, it stuck. In fact, it didn't just stick. It spread. There's Iskandar in Arabic and Persian, Eskender in Ethiopia, Alexandar in ancient Sanskrit. Even in Scotland, where Alastair reigns. Somehow, this boy from Pella became everyone's local legend. And here's a delicious fringe fact for the road. There's a long-standing legend in Pakistan's Hunza Valley that claims their ancestors descend from your soldiers. You probably didn't expect that while crossing the Hindu Kush half-starved and muttering about elephants, but there you go. Ancestral pride, still alive in mountain villages you probably never imagined. Your name even turned up in Medieval Europe's postal system. Kings who wanted to sound impressive signed off with "by the hand of Alexander," like a rubber stamp from the grave. And yet, in all this expansion, there's a loss too. Because we can't separate the dream from the damage. Every time we praise the cities, the libraries, the cultural fusions, you can hear the silence of the ones who didn't make it. The languages that were buried, the elders who resisted and were erased, the farmers who saw their homes vanish under the boots of your army. So we sit with that, not to cancel you, just to round you out. Because myth has a way of trimming off the hard bits, those jagged, inconvenient truths. But history, when it's doing its job, keeps the sharp edges visible. And you, Alexander, are all edges and fire. That's part of why you fascinate us. You are ambition incarnate. You are the question every empire whispers to itself at night. What if I push just a little further? And maybe you also represent what happens when we don't stop. When the thirst for more land, more legacy, more firsts finally catches up. Your own men had a name for it. They called it Alexander's madness. The inability to rest, to pause, to be content. The thing that drove you into deserts and back again, toward oceans that didn't care who you were. And that's the part of your story we don't talk about enough, the loneliness. You were surrounded by thousands, yet alone in your vision, worshipped like a god, but haunted like a man. You burned fast, you burned bright. But in those final months in Babylon, you must have looked out at the world you'd conquered and wondered, was it enough? Would they remember me? The answer, of course, is yes. Too much, even. You are remembered in too many ways to control. As a warlord, a dreamer, a philosopher, a destroyer, a hero, a cautionary tale, a punchline, a god. And that, Alexander, is the strangest immortality of all. Not statues, not coins, not tombs or temples, but conversations, arguments, bedtime stories whispered centuries later. Like this one. Because tonight, as someone lies in the dark, listening to your name float through the quiet, you're still alive, in a way. You're still marching. Still asking the world to imagine something bigger. Still reaching. And now we ease into the final stretch of your story. Not the loud part with swords clashing or cities on fire, but the quiet echo that follows. The hush after the final drumbeat. The part where the world exhales. You've died. That happened long ago. Babylon grew still. Your generals wept or schemed or both. Your body lay cold while your empire, still warm, began to split at the seams. You might have expected it. Or maybe you believed they'd hold it together. That your dream of one vast blended kingdom would survive you. But come on, you know how people are. They didn't last a month. The minute you were gone, the scramble began. Like crows around a lion's carcass, your top generals, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Antigonus, Cassander, Lysimachus, each staked their claim. Not over you exactly, but over pieces of you. Historians still argue whether you intended to split the empire among them or simply hadn't planned at all. Your last words? According to one version, to the strongest. Others say you whispered something no one could hear. Or maybe you said nothing, just closed your eyes and left them to figure it out. Spoiler, they didn't. Wars broke out almost immediately. The Diadochi, your successors, fought bitterly, decade after decade, to carve your empire into fiefdoms. Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Persia, they all changed hands, sometimes more than once. But in their bickering, they also built. Ptolemy took Egypt and made it a hub of learning, founding the famed Library of Alexandria. Seleucus grabbed a giant slice of the East and ruled a realm that stretched from the Aegean to the Indus. Even Antigonus tried to hang on to the whole thing, like a child gripping a balloon with too many strings. You'd probably hate it, all this mess. Or maybe you'd be secretly pleased that they were still fighting over you. That even in death, your name was leverage. And about that name, it became a title. Generals and kings called themselves the New Alexander. Centuries later, Charlemagne, Napoleon, even Mussolini, all referenced you in their quests for domination. A name that once belonged to a single man became shorthand for unstoppable ambition. That's the strange part. Your legacy doesn't shrink over time. It stretches. You became a genre, a code word, a lighthouse and a warning sign. And here's the kicker. You never made it to old age. You died at 32. That's younger than most people figure out how to file their taxes. And yet, in that short time, you managed to redraw the world, rewire cultures, and recode how history would define greatness. No pressure, right? We don't even need to ask how you died at this point. The theories are endless. Typhoid, malaria, poisoning, overindulgence. Historians still argue whether it was natural causes or foul play. Maybe a little of both. Maybe your body was just as tired of the journey as your men. And your funeral? Oh, wow. It was grand, obscene even. A golden hearse, drawn by 64 mules with intricate carvings, jewel-encrusted columns, and a roof shaped like a temple. The thing looked like someone said, "Build me a spaceship, but make it grief." It was supposed to go back to Macedonia, but it never made it. Ptolemy hijacked your coffin and took it to Egypt, because of course he did. Alexandria became your final resting place, at least for a while. As we said earlier, your body played a centuries-long game of hide-and-seek. Even Caesar paid his respects. Augustus, too. Then the visits tapered off. The tomb faded from public memory. Earthquake? Flood? Crusades? No one knows. Your body vanished, but by then, your presence had already gone global. You know, some people believe that dying young is a kind of mercy, that the world remembers you at your best. You never become the tired ruler, the paranoid emperor, the frail old king. You stay. Eternal. Locked in your prime. One hand on the reins, the other pointing at the edge of the map. And that's how most people still picture you. You're not just history, you're mythology now. That's something most rulers never achieve. They live, they die, they get reduced to a footnote. But you're a bedtime story, a riddle, a whisper in the night about how far a single soul can stretch across the world before breaking. And now, with your journey fully told, it's time to let the noise fade. Let's step back. Let's breathe. Let's leave the swords behind. Let's remember not just what you did, but what you dreamed. A world not bound by borders. A world where Persian and Greek could feast at the same table. A world held together not by fear, but by awe. It didn't last. It couldn't. But maybe, just maybe, that flicker of possibility changed something. Maybe it still does. And maybe that's why, even now, tonight, we remember. Now, let the dust settle across the ancient roads. You've traveled far, farther than most humans ever dream. From the golden halls of Pella to the sun-baked deserts of Egypt, through the smoky mountains of Persia, and along the monsoon-soaked edges of India. Your sandals have pressed into every kind of soil, and your breath has mingled with the winds of 1,000 cities. But tonight, there are no more maps to conquer. No more rivers to cross. No more horses to mount. Just the quiet hum of history. You can feel it now, that hush that comes only at the very end. The air still warm, but fading. The stars above you familiar but distant. The campfires burned low, the swords tucked away, and all the war cries, finally, nothing but memories. And it's peaceful. The roar that defined your life softens into whispers, like waves smoothing over jagged stones. Here, in this moment, you don't need to be a general, or a god, or a legend. You can simply be a young boy with a lion's heart once chasing stories and somehow becoming one. So breathe deeply wherever you are. Let your own limbs grow heavy. Let the world melt into dark, velvety silence. Let your mind release its hold on the story just for tonight. Because tomorrow will still be there. And Alexander, he'll still be out there too, etched into statues, echoed in books, and maybe, just maybe, drifting softly in dreams. Good night, explorer. Good night, conqueror. Good night, king.